share my screen. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop the link in the chat just for convenience if people want to and like to follow along. I'm going to have a few things to say about a few things before we begin the regular work of the week. One of the things I want to remind everybody is that the design of this class is meant to be something called the flipped classroom. And if you've been coming every week, you would have heard this before, and it'll be sinking in the way we want to, the way we want you to experience the module and the way we want you to work on these days that we have together. And just to reiterate what the flipped classroom is, the idea for it, it's not a new idea. It's been around for a little while, but it's actually quite hard to implement this. The idea is that the old-fashioned way of teaching is that you get some old guy like me standing up in front of you and just telling you stuff, telling you facts for hours, during lecture time. And, you'll be taking notes when the pearls of wisdom drop on the ground before your feet. That's what you're expected to do in the old-fashioned way of teaching. And then I will, possibly issue you some kind of task, some homework or problem set, and I'll send you home. And you'll do that all by yourself. And sometimes you run into problems, you want to ask questions, but, that's your problem because we're out of class time now. And a lot of university teaching still goes by that model. Some people call it the sage on the stage. So the time we have together is one-way communication. The time we have apart is solving those problems. Well, the flipped classroom, literally, it just reverses that pattern so that when we spend time in class, we're working on the assessment. The idea is that you can work with each other, you can communicate about it, you can ask questions in real time while somebody's there to help you. You can ask any kind of question. You can ask questions about the nuts and bolts of how it is all supposed to work. You can ask questions about the actual assignments themselves, and you have support and help. And then in the time between class, you're meant to learn some of those facts and get an idea of what we're doing on a particular week. And the format that we have for this class, if I just change to the schedule link, everything should be all laid out for you. So we look on a week like this week, week 4 for algorithms. A lot of people would consider, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger for people so it's easier to read. A lot of people would consider algorithms as one of the most fun things to learn when you're learning coding. And some of the algorithms, some of the tricks and how they work, it creates very transferable knowledge. Well, the idea for this week is that before you came to class, you would have watched the lecture video. If I just scroll up a little bit to get the header. So in the lecture column, you would have already watched the lecture video. In the notes, you would have already gone through the notes, probably taken some notes yourself, and there are code snippets, and this just supports what's in the lecture, the notes do, in a little more detail and in a different mode, a different format. The idea for having replicated formats, I don't think I've explained this before in the flipped classroom, is that during that time before you come to class this week, where you're working on your own, different individual people like to learn in different ways. They have preferences. And so the idea for having both lecture and notes and providing the code and providing these much shorter tutorials that demonstrate concepts in the lecture, the idea for having all of that, it all overlaps a little bit. One idea for having that is that it reinforces the message. It reinforces what we're doing, so you get a couple of chances for something to stick, and you don't have to hunt and peck back through the notes when you're doing the assessment. Another reason for it is that some learners, myself included, I'll tell you my preference in a moment. Some learners have a preference for the mode or how they want to consume this material. And so you have a choice of how you do it. You have a long format traditional lecture that you can start and stop and, consume it in a couple of sittings or all at once if you like to do it that way. You have the notes, which are written. Now, they're on a web page. This is not very friendly for doing on a phone. You probably want to look at those on a larger screen, a laptop or a computer. You have the code. You want to run the code, and I encourage you to type and run the code every week. And in doing so, you go beyond just having the information, watching somebody else run the code wash over you, like you're a pebble on the beach or something. Instead, if you run the code yourself, you're going to make mistakes. If you type it yourself, you're going to make typos. You're going to find those errors, and quickly you're going to level up in your own code practice. And it will be quick. If you do this every week for just a few weeks, there'll be a big difference. You'll start to recognize errors. You'll start to recognize the indentation that's required for C code, the spacing. You'll stop forgetting that semicolon at the end of commands. The tutorials are meant to reinforce the key concepts. All of them are concepts that come up in the assessment. They're designed very specifically for that. And I've threatened in the past, if we just go to the tutorial page for this week, I've threatened in the past, if we look at the link on the right side, that just links to the slides, which, are probably helpful. Some people may just want to look at the slides and take notes. And if you look on the right, there's a video for each one where I go through the slides and talk through the concepts. Haven't done a lot of live coding in the videos yet. I love to do live coding, but I've had feedback in the past where live coding is kind of boring to watch on video, so I haven't really done a lot of it. It is my favorite thing to do. So if people would find that interesting, drop me a line in Discord or in the chat here today. What I've threatened and up to now is that I won't necessarily make videos for these tutorials. Instead, it's just the slides. And so if you like the videos and you want me to keep making them, go ahead and let me know. You can let me know in Discord. Any feedback is welcome. Constructive, even negative feedback, very welcome, because I want to tailor this experience to what people want and need. And it's the first time, it's the first year of this course. It's the first year of this module. So, give us some feedback, please. You'll be able to impact your own future. All right. So the idea is that you would have gone through the link for this week prior to today. So my first survey in chat, Megan, can you just confirm, are there still 6 people present? So I'm going to expect 6 answers in the chat from the students, and just let me know if there's a technical problem and somebody hasn't logged into Twitch yet, but I expect everybody to log in to participate in these chats. I'll assume everybody has done that for now, and after I ask this first question, Megan can let me know if there are any technical difficulties, but I won't go on until I get 6 answers in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if you've consumed a good amount of this material, watched the videos and everything else for this week, gone through the notes or at least looked at them a little bit, and a 0 if you haven't really been able to do that before class today. So go ahead and answer. 1 if you've consumed some of this material before to prep for class. 0 if you haven't been able to do that. I'm literally just wanting the information from you so I can talk to you about it. Okay, I expect 5 answers before I go on, and Megan, please help that person log in so they can participate. Yeah, okay. didn't watch the videos but did some of the tasks, that's fine. That is a little bit of participation, so that's definitely better than by the tasks. Do you mean that you did the problem set for the week? Read the notes and ran the code in the notes. That's pretty good. That's good engagement. You don't have to do it all. You can pick and choose what works for you. Okay. Some of this stuff, I'm still waiting on a couple of answers. Still waiting on at least 2 answers in chat. I'm just going to wait and talk until I get those answers. So 1, if you've engaged with all or some of this stuff before class today for this week. 0 if you haven't. I'm not trying to call anybody out. I literally just want to see where we are on week 4 so I can give some advice. I'm still expecting at least 2 answers. Megan, can you follow up on the people that haven't answered and see whether they are able to log in or there's some technical difficulty? Okay. So I've gotten 3 answers. There's 6 people in class. 1 person's resetting their password. That leaves 2 people. Because I'm not able to see the classroom, I'm at a disadvantage here. Yeah, the cryptography and DSA is one of the very fundamental concepts. And yeah, if you're already as a first-year university student thinking about tech interviews, 1, I think that's great. You're thinking about the practicalities of getting a job. On the other hand, I just observe that there's a lot of hype, and the sort of coding bros in social media really hype up those tech interviews because they want you to watch their stuff. So it is important. It is an important concept. Tech interviews, we'll start talking about those in future modules and the skills that you might need to do them. While we're waiting for people, I think tech interviews I think that they are dying a death, and they probably won't be around in their current form by the time you guys get your degree because of AI. The typical way to do a tech interview is there's 2 traditional formats. One is they would send you some questions, and you would answer them in a day or 2 days or a week. That's the most old-fashioned, but that was and is still used a little bit. A more common one these days is that you are given some questions maybe the day before your interview, and you go through live answers. And these days, thank you for that answer. Still waiting on one person. It's not changing their email. Is that when you're live, these are all usually remote, and so you can find millions of videos now of people doing tech interviews live while they're cheating with AI on the side. And there's just no way around this. I think that companies will have to lean into that, just like universities will in the future, and accommodate AI for that. All right, I think that's enough. I'm not going to wait any longer and hold everybody else up. I see some people have gotten into the flipped classroom thing, and some people haven't quite yet got the idea. But let me just tell you that you have a much easier time in this class, and much more fun time in this class if you at least try out the system that we have envisioned. And the system that I envisioned for this is that you watch the lecture before class. Now, I try to have something up by Thursday afternoon every week, and I'll do that this week. There'll be something up, probably the lecture by tomorrow afternoon for next week. The notes are up for every week already, So you can, if you're desperate to start something on the day after a lecture, you can always start. Hello. All right. It's good to see you guys in chat. I'm glad you've done it. Good. Thank you for that. The code is up for every week as well, and the tutorial slides are up for every week. So you can start this right after the current lecture, and videos and other support information for the lecture and the tutorials will be up. They'll start being up by Thursday. I try to finish them by Friday. It's the first time the module has come, and I have some constraints in my work week every other week. So, do my best to get those up. Don't promise any, by the way, don't promise any videos. This is just something we're trying out. It's traditional to have video lectures, but because we're trying to do this a different way, I'd appreciate feedback. If you like the lectures, I'll do them. If you'd rather have live coding, if you'd rather have live coding instead of the lectures and go through the code, we can try that one week if somebody would prefer it. Somebody did mention they like live coding and watch it already. AWS is also something to think about in cloud infrastructure, and we certainly will bring that in future modules. We'll be playing with it and using it. Some people noticed yesterday that there was a massive cloud breakdown in AWS services. I don't know if you'd like this kind of statistic, but AWS is by far the largest practitioner and provider for cloud services in the world. And if I recall, the last time I did research on this and looked at the data, Amazon AWS through AWS provided about 60% of the capacity for the world's internet and cloud-based services for businesses. And Microsoft was a distant second at around 30% or so. And then there were others, that were much smaller than that trailed off. And AWS had a huge outage yesterday in their largest data center in the United States in Virginia. Now, why would that affect us? Because we should go through their data center in London, or we should go through their data center in Ireland, or maybe one on the continent. And what probably happened is that it's so big, the provision in Virginia, that some support services in those other nodes around the world, in Europe and other places, depend on some services for Virginia. And as far as I understand, they're still trying to track down exactly what happened. But it did affect us a little bit because it affected our code spaces. And that brings me to an interesting point to make about cloud services. We will play with this in future modules, not this module. Although we use it in this module, we use it in almost every module, cloud-based services, whether you know it or not, whether you think about it or not. But Microsoft owns GitHub. Microsoft owns and provisions GitHub Classroom. Microsoft owns and provisions GitHub code spaces. And a lot of their capacity that they offer is, guess what? It's subleased from AWS. For some of their Azure services, they lease AWS services to run it and provide it, although they have invested in some data centers. Yeah, I mean, this migration to the cloud has been happening for years. I don't want to get too off topic, so that's the last thing I'll say about this. We'll get on with my list of things to get through today. But all businesses that are of a certain size should be run into the cloud. There's a business model. It's really well suited to young, forward-thrusting people like yourselves sitting in the classroom today that looks at local businesses that are small and assesses whether or not they have a website. And the business model is to offer to build them. Now, this is under the AI era. To make a real professional basic website for somebody, web developers used to charge $10,000. That was the price. And then if you wanted a budget one, excuse me, I have to sneeze. If you wanted to provide a budget one, $5,000 was the was the budget. But now with AI, with the AI bros, that's what I call them, the social media monsters that flog their own social media profile with interesting stuff to people like you and me, is they say that the new oil for somebody to start a business fast is to look for those local businesses that don't have a website and offer them a very low price, and you create their website very efficiently and host it using AI and cloud-based tools. So you can think about that. We'll definitely cover, don't worry, never fear, we'll definitely cover DevOps and cloud stuff in future modules. Got to be patient, though. Young people like you these days, it used to be the tradition. It took a long time, and universities are very conservative too. It took a long time in your studies to get up to speed and learn the basics of coding, nuts and bolts of coding. But things are faster these days because AI has really removed the requirement, the necessity of becoming a very competent programmer before you can do anything. You can actually do stuff now. We have to move on. Let's go on to other things, fun as it is to talk about that stuff, and we can continue talking about it in the future. Thing I want to mention is that there's a frequently asked questions on this website. I'll just drop the link in the chat in case you want to do it. I don't know if you guys have looked at this page before, but I've made a few new posts responding to some questions we've had in Discord. One of the questions, I've observed a couple of people that are working ahead on the problem sets. And as you know, the problem sets are all posted to the end of the course. And, my answer is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can work ahead on the problem sets. But I've qualified this that, we'd actually prefer that you don't work ahead. And if you do work ahead, don't work too far ahead. And you save your problem sets to do in class, because we have set aside this 3.5 hours to do them in class. And here's a way to think about this. If you've had a little experience coding before, these early problem sets are going to be really easy for you. You've heard these concepts before. You're going to be coding them like crazy. You will have noticed that, like for week 2, literally all the code was given to you. And week 3 is really soft soap as well, really giving you most of the nuts and bolts to get almost all the points without actually coding anything, just repeating back in your code files what's on the website. Well, that will change in the future. And they will get a little tougher, and I hope it's fun. Having a challenge, a problem you have to think about makes it fun. I hope some of you who already have had some coding experience will find something to be fun in the later problem sets, and they get a little more challenging. But that's not just completing the problem sets is not the whole point. Of course, that's part of the point. That's the hurdle. That's the minimum bar that the university requires you to get over. And I have to play along by curating these problem sets to adhere to what the university expects from me, which is, I wish we didn't have to produce any numerical grades. I wish that I could rate people based on their engagement and their performance in the class in an indirect way rather than in an explicit way with a numerical grade. But I can't do that. The university requires that I give you a explicit mark on a scale 1 to 100, and because there's so little time and so many modules and so many students, we have a lot of constraints on how we do that. I think these problem sets are set up in a logical way. What do you get out beside that crass numerical grade that labels your quality as a student? What else can you get out of these problem sets? I humbly suggest if you leave them and work on them in class at the suggested pace of work, one thing you'll get is you'll get to interact with your students. Some of them, your fellow students, some of them may not be as experienced as you, and it may be fun to experience with them the solutions to these problem sets. And I hope you find some of the topics and the background for some of these problem sets interesting, fun, cryptography. We touch on a lot of things. We touch on web infrastructure at the end. Hope you really get thinking about this stuff. And the nuts and bolts of this, if you race ahead to the end, you're going to be very bored in class. There won't be much for you to do in class, because that's what we're going to spend almost all class time doing. And you'll miss out on that interaction if you don't. Now, the first thing on my list here to mention is another thing I can mention right now, and that's this concept of co-coding. I hope you've heard of co-coding. If you haven't, I just want to talk to you about it just a little bit. I turned my noise gate on my mic down, and you can hear my desk, and if I start typing, you're going to hear my extremely loud, extremely clicky keyboard in a second. But the idea for doing co-coding is is to do something like I'm just going to make a little white space here over on the side so that I can draw. Let's see if that works. It's not really working. Nope, not working. It doesn't work on all web pages. The idea for co-coding is that more than one person sits. One person shares their screen. If you look around the room, you'll see 6 computers that are slightly bigger than the others. I think these are big enough to see somebody else's screen. The idea is you would plug your laptop, one person at a group. This groups can be small. We're a small group, so if there's 6 people, it would be groups of 3. We want groups of 2 or 3. 3 is better than 2. And the idea is you take turns being the lead coder, and you would read, for example, if we go back to the schedule and go to the problem sets for this week and go to the first one. The idea is that the first person to take control of the screen would navigate to this page and say, right, our group's going to work on this one first. And as a group, you read and discuss what you understand the task is. And everybody has their own laptop open and is working on their own, but one person is running the live code and sharing it on the big screen, and you guys can discuss it and do it. Now, this requires you to participate, and the co-coding is the way we've designed this module for every single week. And so if you've already done the problem set for the week, the co-coding is going to be very boring. And like part of the social part of doing co-coding, there's a social part and there's an intellectual part. The intellectual part is, the academic part. That's a skill you can take with you for the tech interview, or, your job, or even your personal practice, which, as young coders, you can start today. In fact, if you haven't already started doing little projects for yourself, what are you waiting for? Just go ahead and get on with it. So the social part is you get to interact with your fellow students. You get to learn something about where they are coding. You get some insight on where everybody is relative to the skills they're bringing to the table on this first term of this university course. The intellectual part is that you can learn about coding during this, so there's a little bit of intellectual rub-off on that, but you're going to have to learn the algorithms. You're going to have to go through the stuff before class on your own. The real important intellectual part that you get from co-coding is the technique of working with others. If you've already done everything when you rock up to the table with your group, you're not going to be able to fully participate in the spirit of co-coding as it's intended. The spirit of cooperation involves listening to what others are saying, listening to their ideas, listening to them when they need help, and then humbly making suggestions that are constructive when input like that is required. For these earlier, some of these early tasks in the problem sets are fairly simple. So, you will have to work at a pace in the co-coding. If you're just measuring everything by pure efficiency, it's going to be slower. It's going to be less efficient than pure efficiency. But co-coding really pays off when there's a hard problem and you have people of different expertise, experts in different aspects of building a software solution or a web app. So we're really learning the very basics of how to behave yourself in a group setting here. And I would personally really appreciate it if you would entertain the co-coding experience in these class sessions. Are there any questions about co-coding? Because I know it's maybe it seems like a vague idea to you, so we could talk about it for a minute. Are there any questions about how it works? Are you unsure that it's effective? Is there anyone who doesn't want to participate? Go ahead and let's take a few minutes and talk about it if there are any such questions. If there aren't, that's fine. We'll just get on with it, and maybe it's working. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, as you will understand, because I'm not there in person, and I apologize for that, and I regret that I can't be there in person. Yeah, well, yes and no. It's a good question. Only one person should be typing right. It's a very good question. Actually, the idea is that one person is typing, and then it's shown on the screen, and the other people should be paying attention to that when it's on the screen. But for example, for this section of the code that I'm looking at now on our webpage, let me just make it a little bit bigger. What I'd expect is somebody to run the wget command on the screen, and then I'd expect, you're downloading the zip, I'd expect everybody else to run the same command on their own laptop, because you're all doing the assessment together, unless you want to pay attention and do it later, which would be absolutely fine. So part of experiencing co-coding is that, you're working together, in this case on an assessment in the form of the problem sets. Only one person will be coding on the big screen, and people should be watching and paying attention to that. But after you make a little progress, it'd be fine for everybody, the other people who are on their laptops, to go ahead and do it in their own code spaces. That's the way that I would do it in this setting. And also the idea is that if I just click the back button, that if you have a group of 3, most weeks have several of these problem sets. And so maybe one person will share their screen for this one and set the stage, and then the next person will share their laptop. So you take turns being the lead screen sharer. And that's the idea for this. So only one person's typing on the screen, yes, but the other people probably will be typing if you're working along at the same pace on your own code space, and that's perfectly fine for this. Okay, I'm going to go back to the frequently asked questions and address another thing here, and that's what is the deadline for the problem sets. So I've written in a little answer to this. I'm just going to block off the my list of things to go through. So the university dictates certain constraints on these problem sets that I have no control over. So I already knew the due date for the problem sets is a single date, and it's December 11th on a Thursday at 3 p.m. Now, I did have some input on picking the time in the term, the week in the term, and every module leader has input on picking the week that an assessment is due. But the university decided some years ago that every module would only have 1 or 2 due dates for assessments. This is purely administrative. It has nothing to do with learning to code. I can assure you it has nothing to do with my personal teaching philosophy. I don't even agree with it. I think that the people running the modules should have the final say in everything that happens in the module. But that's me. But I still have to adhere to the university guidelines, even if I don't agree with them. And what I found over many years of helping people learn to code and learn to do statistical analyses and building up skills that are valuable, that you can get a good job doing, is that it's students tend to do better if there are many, many assessments. And not only that, they tend to do better if those assessments count for points. So I cannot make 10 weekly assessments with different due dates with a deadline under the university guidelines. That's too many assessments. They won't let me do that. So I've created this hybrid system, and I have used this before, and it works perfectly well. And I just want to alleviate the confusion about it. So to get all the points for your assessments, you need to complete all of your problem sets. Remember, I said I pick the week. I do not pick the day. I do not pick the time. The university picks every assessment for undergrads in the university is due on the same day and time. So all of your assessments for all your modules should be due on a Thursday at 3 p.m. And just the week will be different. But you'll see from the schedule that I've put due dates that are the day before the following lecture on every one of these. And these are what I refer to here as the suggested due dates, the suggested deadlines. Now, you aren't penalized for turning in your work after the suggested deadlines. I'm actually still thinking, Megan and I have been discussing, should we reward people who do turn them in by the suggested deadlines in some way and don't have GitHub repo updates after the suggested deadline. We haven't implemented that yet, but we may decide to reward people who do turn them in by the suggested deadlines. That's well within the university guidelines to do that. But what we won't do, I don't think it's fair. This is also along the university guidelines, and it's one that I agree with. It's not fair to penalize people who don't meet the suggested deadlines. And there are many reasons for this. One, I don't want to penalize anybody. I already told you I don't even like giving grades. I want to assess people on their engagement. And one of the reasons for that is it's not very fun for me to have to put a number value on your performance. I don't want to do that. I want to collaborate with students, and I want to learn stuff, and I want to have fun when I'm teaching you. So we're not going to penalize anybody for these. It's also a negative thing if let's say that somebody misses a couple of weeks at the beginning, and that actually affects quite a few people signed up for this module. Then you're already behind the suggested deadlines. This does two things. One, it demoralizes people that are trying to catch up, and we don't want to do that. But it is a task to stay on top of, because there's a lot of work each week. I realize that. Two, it's against the university guidelines to constantly curate extensions for people. So every week there might be 1 or 2 people in a big class, there might be more in a big class, that miss the deadline for legitimate reasons. And so the administration for that, which is out of my control, that has to go through, again, a university process to formally extend a deadline, will only entertain those kinds of things for this ultimate deadline. So I hope that explains the difference between the the ultimate deadline, the university official deadline, all those problem sets have to be finished in December. Seems like a long time away from now. It's 2 months from now. And it's these suggested deadlines that's the pace I think you should be working at, and we may reward people for hitting those suggested deadlines. A thing I observed so far is that I appreciate so much. Thank you so much for the people that have been participating and turning in your work. It's been such a pleasure seeing those repos update, and we're just about to start going through them. We will manually look at every submission, although there's the auto grader. And we still need to decide about a reward, if any, for people that do hit the deadlines for the end. Are there any questions about these 2 deadlines? I know it's a bit confusing, but again, I've been doing this for a long time, and this is the best balance I can find for student benefit, something that also fits with the university guidelines. Any comments or questions about the deadlines or how that works? Okay. If any come up, we can, feel free to ask them in a future class, or feel free to ask them in Discord. It brings us to Discord. I want to mention the use of Discord. A couple of points I want to make. Can I take a survey right now? Put a 1 in the chat if you are logged into Discord right now and you've put more than 1 message in Discord, and put a 0 if you're not logged in, or if you put less than 1 message, if you put exactly 1 message or less than 1 message. So I know some people have been participating. Yeah, that's good. That's 4 people. Or do we still have 2 people that can't manage to get into Twitch after all this time? I feel like we may need to take some time to resolve these technical difficulties, because I want everybody to participate. All right. Okay, good. There's the other people. Thank you. There's 5 people now. There's still 1 person. I don't want to call anybody out. I'm not there in person, but I have to have the participation given the way that we're doing this remotely, or I have to have some feedback. So I either need Megan to tell me that there's a technical difficulty that you're working on or that can't be solved, or I need somebody to tell me why there's somebody not answering. Okay. All right. That's a full answer. There's still 6 people in class. Are there still 6 students? Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for answering. Let's just try to answer these quickly, because it'll just go faster, and it's the way that I want to operate this, and it should be very easy to participate. It just requires you to participate. Okay, so if you haven't used Discord yet, I recommend that you start using it. It's a primary way that we've set up to communicate outside of class. If you look at the page, it looks like this, and there are a few servers that you might look at. One is a forum for this module, and I've just been making announcements, official announcements, like when the videos are up, and you can check. There are servers for your other modules in data science, and I think Joe will start using those in the future. There's a couple of other ones. There's a general, if you have memes or something that is interesting, as long as we keep it safe for work and we're nice to each other, you can use general for anything you want to. Code help is one I expect everybody to use. If you come across help, you can post the question in code. If you have a problem with the code space, you take your choice. Eventually, we will start using these other channels as well. I put up a voice chat per request from somebody. So that's up. So use it if you want to. You can use it for study groups or for fun. See if you have a use for it. But I wanted to say a few things about the use of Discord. One thing is that I've been using this kind of chat program for a long time in my teaching and other activities. This is the first year I've used Discord. Up till now, for many years, I've used Slack. For over 10 years, I used Slack. One of the reasons I stopped using Slack, if you've never used it, it's very much like Discord. It's almost identical. One of the reasons I stopped using it was that it was sold to a new company, and they started monetizing it heavily, and it became something I couldn't use for my purposes. And Discord is just perfect. I like Discord. I noticed that a lot of students already use Discord, but not every student. So I do impose, if you want to get help, this is the fastest way for you to get help. But there are some guidelines to effectively get help. And this is pretty important. I may even write a frequently asked question on the website about this, so I can direct people that aren't doing it. One is we don't want you to send us direct messages on Discord to ask for help. That may seem counterintuitive. I've emphasized the use of Discord for getting help, but the value that I see in using a public forum like this for asking questions and getting help is the benefit that I see is that other people, we can do this publicly, other people, you ask your question publicly, not with a direct message to me or to Megan, and other people can see your question, and potentially other students who have the answer can answer you. Now, once we get going, we're quite a small group. I think there are 15 students, but the most we've ever had in class is 7. So I think that's true. So even if we only get 15 students, if there are 15 eyes on this, the chances are, if you want to and like to participate in things like this, it would constitute, full engagement in your studies. Feel free to answer questions if somebody asks, but you can't do that if you send a direct message. Not only that, you got to keep in mind that as lecturers, I can keep an eye on Discord, and I have other things going on in Discord and other channels that I'm involved in, not a huge amount. You can see that yourself. I don't have a huge amount of channels that I participate in, and yet, I keep my eye on what's going on, and I answer things that are relevant to me. And you should too. At least I encourage you to. If you have Discord, on your phone, I use it exclusively at the computer. I've never even installed it on my phone. That's just me. I'm very conservative in my use of computers, and I spend a lot of time in front of a desktop computer. But don't send us direct messages. We won't answer them. And as a matter of fact, as of this morning, I've turned them off for this server because there have been a few coming through on questions, and it is against the spirit of using this as a tool. So I wanted to say that. Second, if you're asking for code help, you can look at the code instructions. I'm just going to put these in our Twitch chat here for you to easily see. And essentially, if you're going to ask a question, these 4 guidelines are ones that you want to do. And if you want to read about it, I've linked to a Stack Overflow question. I see my Twitch chat reached its limit, so I'll just put that Stack Overflow link as well. That tells you how to effectively ask for code help online. And in a nutshell, you should provide some code that you copy and paste into the chat. What I see sometimes when people are starting to use a platform like this to get code help is it's very tempting to take a screenshot. I've even seen people that are using Discord on their phone, but they're coding on their computer, literally lift their phone to take a picture of their screen and to post that and say, getting an error, help please. And that's a polite request for help, but it, by the standards that are expected for asking a question online, it's not considered polite. It's considered very rude. And one reason is that if somebody was going to give you some help, the easiest way to give somebody help is to copy and paste their code into your own coding environment and fiddle with it until you fix it. You know, you may not instantly be able to just look at the code and do it. You may have to run it, look at the error message, try a little fix. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh yeah, here it is. And then paste the code back. That would be a typical way to do it. If it's a screenshot, if it's nothing but a screenshot, you can't do that problem solving unless you type in all the code yourself. And frankly, no, I will never do that to answer a question. I'd be willing to do backflips to help anybody with a code problem, not the least of which reason I'm a helpful guy, but I like it. It's fun for me, and it's fun for other people too. But I'm not going to type in your code again when it would be so easy for you to type it in. So listen, my suggestion for you is if you're doing code on your computer, install the desktop app for Discord and communicate with us that way, where you can copy and paste the code. Second, use good coding practice. One of the ones is if you have more than a couple of variables, this really is more relevant for more complex code like we will encounter towards the end of this module and in other modules. But use good coding practice. Put in comments. Make sure your variable names are concise, and use comments to highlight where the problem is. And you want to make the minimal reproducible problem. Remove everything that's not related to the problem if you can. And again, this is relevant for longer pieces of code. It's particularly relevant for snippets of Python and R once we get going in those languages to reproduce parts of the code. Of course, even for a question in Python and R, you'd still want to have a minimum reproducible code with the libraries, and if you're using data, the data. Read the Stack Overflow article about producing a minimum reproducible example. This is the polite way to ask questions. And when I was a student, and I was learning about, the internet was exploding when I was sitting where you are. And I was really, really enthusiastic about it and have been my whole life. And I was studying statistics at university at the time. And there was a forum. These days, it was a little bit like a forum on Twitch, and it was the R forums. And it was the most active people were professional statisticians and professors, pretty important, well-known people in the R forum. And if you asked a question, if somebody were to put a picture of their code and have a vague question, I found the community there to be incredibly mean. They would troll you and make fun of you. And these were like grown men, grown professors and grown men and women. And I was just a student. So quite quickly I realized, actually I really respect these people, and I don't like being mean to. I don't like people insulting me, telling me that I'm lazy when I post a lazy question. And so I learned quite quickly, because it was so mean and they were so quick to call people out when they were asking stupid questions, that I learned best practice that way. I'm not like that. I don't like to be mean to people. I like to be nice to people all the time. But also, we just require, if you're going to get help, to do it. Another thing I want to just mention, I did mention it before, is if you're working on these and it's the night before the suggested deadline, well, let me remind you that it's just a suggested deadline until December 11th. But this is just general advice for any deadline. if you're going to ask something in the evening the night before December 11th about problem sets, 6, 7, and 10, you're probably not going to get an answer. So you need to construct your questions in a timely way and, ask them when they come up. And we have to be realistic about this. Having said all of that, we are enthusiastic about using Discord. The problems will get harder. The other modules will have similar setups. We'll add forums as the course unfolds. But I require everybody to get into the habit of asking good questions and adhering to that minimal reproducible problem ethos. And I'll help you do it. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to insult you, but I'll keep reminding you. And once we start getting some beefier questions, I will remind you about how to do that. And having said that, there are only a couple of people that have been asking questions so far. So for the people that are catching up, go ahead and use this as a resource. You will find it valuable. Any comments or questions about Discord? If there aren't, tally ho. Let's just continue using this. Got a fun one. Next is that we have what we call a data club that I founded here at Harper some years ago. It usually runs every week. Call it the Harper Adams Data Club or HADSI. We've just started it up again. Had our first meeting in a while last night. I've been away from work in the last year a little bit, and Megan was running it in my stead and did a very good job, and everybody was very appreciative of that. So we've just sort of relaunched it again. And now most of the people that attend HADSI are research students. And if we look at the schedule, I've just made a new website for the relaunch because the old one was getting a little clustered and I wanted to change a few small things. And I've just put this website up. I've just noticed that my page counter is not working, so I've really just put this up, and I need to look at why my page counter is not working. But we had a 190th meeting yesterday, and I gave a talk about my thoughts about using AI to analyze data. And like I said, it's mostly research students, masters and PhD students. Sometimes there are lecturers there as well. But you are very welcome to come if you are interested. We always do coding. We always do some live coding. It's usually talking about professional practice, a lot of statistics stuff, some Python, a lot of statistical thinking, machine learning, computer vision. But I'd say about half is pure statistics. And if I would say one thing to a young data scientist is most people who would call themselves data scientists absolutely suck as statisticians. I mean, I'm a statistician, but people call me a data scientist these days, and I can get away with it totally. But I've never yet met somebody who was trained up as a data scientist who could get away with being called a statistician. I'll put it that way. So you probably can benefit professionally by just seeing what it's about, just by watching these meetings. Anyway, I'm inviting you all. If you want to come, you can come. I will go ahead and, you don't need to do anything. I will go ahead and invite you to the upcoming meetings. The next meeting I'm going to talk, again, this is aimed at research students, about open data practices, and I'm going to specifically talk about how to publish data sets that you create. This could be relevant to you in the future, but I think the idea of open data, there'll be a lot that people might be interested in. We're going to analyze some biodiversity data after that. Heads up, Megan, this is probably going to be the green box bird data, or maybe some other data sets. I want to talk to you about it. I'll take responsibility for the meeting, but we talk about all sorts of things. Anyway, I'm going to add you to the invite for a recurring meeting I didn't make a recurring meeting for our first meeting of the relaunch, but I'll send you a recurring invite through your Harper Adams address. We meet on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. via Teams. I don't think there's a class during that time, but correct me in chat if I'm wrong. So come if you want to see what it's about. If you're not interested, fair enough, but I wanted to mention that. Any comments from anybody about HADSI? Yes, that's fine. This is a good point to have a break. I have, I'll tell you what. Let me go for 5 to 10 more minutes, and then it would be the best time to have a break because I've got one more point to make, and then we can stop for a break. Is that okay? My last point to make is about pseudocode. Now, pseudocode is a concept that I introduced in the first lecture and in the notes. And this is the way that you write programs. It's really not optional to do. We've noticed in some of the submissions that people don't seem to be using pseudocode in their code. And the way that you might start any program is just to write the steps. And for a simple program, it might be something like this. Literally just create main and print hello world. The neat thing about this pseudocode approach is that you can write it right in your C script while you're coding, do these steps one at a time, and they can become comments in your code that comment your code. And, I expect to see these in your work. Pseudocode, I don't view it as an optional thing. One, it's best practice. Two, every coder I've ever met uses pseudocode in some form, either explicitly or implicitly in the creation of their comments. Even if you're taking notes to outline the structure and the outputs and the parts of a program to get it to work, it becomes much more valuable when you're doing something slightly more complicated than the utterly trivial. And I mean slightly. I wrote a program yesterday during the HADSI session that actually wrote 2 scripts for that session, and it took me 45 minutes to do it. And I'd say about a third to a half of that time, maybe a bit more, was writing the comments as pseudocode. And I tend to write, when I'm writing a script like an R script, I tend to write a table of contents. So I write my pseudocode as contents. And my pseudocode for a data analysis script might look something like setup in libraries. Then it might be something like data wrangling. Then it might be analysis and graphs. And, quite explicitly, if you look into my own code, and I'll have subsections to this, depending on how big the task at hand is. In the setup in libraries, I'll literally read in the data and load the libraries in that section. In the data wrangling, I'll convert variable classes to ones that are required, and I'll transform data if I need to, probably make some exploratory data analysis graphs. And in the analysis and graphs, based on my EDA, my exploratory data analysis, I will actually perform the statistical analysis. Sometimes I'll format it for output there, and I'll create the graphs. I do this every time I code, and I've been doing it for, a long time. So this isn't optional. I expect everybody to do this pseudocode. Not only that, I give you the pseudocode in the almost all of the problem sets. There's a strong hint that, here are the steps you need to go through. That should be your pseudocode, and that should explicitly be in comments in your scripts. Now, for simple scripts, there's the tendency for us to think, this is so simple. I can't be bothered. I'm not going to waste the time. It's just a waste because it's so simple. I can just do it all. It's all in my head right now. But listen, you're right. You have to get into the best practice habits early on. And once you do it, you'll never go back. It'll be a lifelong habit. And that's what's going to make you good at your job. That's what's going to make you a good coder. That's what's going to make you a good colleague. So I really can't emphasize this enough. We will be looking at your scripts, every one of them. And like I said, we already have looked at some of them and noticed that not everybody is using pseudocode and commenting it out in your scripts like we expect. So I'll mention this now. I may actually add a tutorial at some point to do it, which I'll alert everybody of. Any comments or questions about pseudocode? If you've coded before, you've encountered this idea and probably already doing it. It'll probably be the newer folks that haven't experienced this before and maybe don't understand why it's so important. Any comments or questions about this? Well, this is that good time for the break that we'll have. We'll come back in, is 10 minutes enough? It's 1:15 the hour. Maybe we can come back at 11, give everybody a real good break. Come back at 11. I'm just going to say a few words when we come back, and then we're going to start the day's activities. So I'll explain that, and it's going to be going into co-coding groups and working through the assessments. That's what we're doing for the rest of the day. We'll touch base a few times in the next couple hours, but I'll see everybody at 11.